All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. My name is Doug. I'm the president of the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie. We are a humanist group that used to meet before COVID in person. We do these Zoom presentations or try to do them at least once a month. Anybody's interested in the group and joining or checking us out further, you can check out our website at humanistwle.org. With us today is Charles Hill. He's a facilitator for recovering from
Close enough.
Recovering from religion. Did I get it right?
That works.
I don't have any notes with me. I apologize. Recovering from religion and the Clergy Project. And one of the reasons why I kind of wanted him to talk to us today is because we're going to be in the process eventually of trying to form a local recovering from religion group here in the Toledo area. And we have Joe Pittenger, who's going to help lead that, and he'll be talking later as well. So thank you for coming, Charles, and take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Doug, and Bev, Vice President Bev. Wow, where do you start? And forgive me, I'll try to act like I'm doing a true video presentation that's being recorded, because we do these Zoom things every week. And I think all of us remember back to when we started virtual. We were all like this the whole time, remember? We were like, you know, and now when we have group or you go on these meetings, you know, everybody's doing like everything the whole time, you know, they're just doing whatever they want. So forgive my ADD-edness, but it's great to be here. I always say I'll try to be brief, but being a former pastor, you know, I'll preface it with I'll try to be brief and just to the point. And then Joe will too, but two of us just took like 15 minutes talking about nothing. So
I remember when I used to be preaching and I would say like in closing, and then people would be like, that means 15 more minutes.
in closing.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, I have a huge passion for what we're going to talk about tonight. And that's, as Doug mentioned, there's two separate groups. We have Recovering from Religion, and oh, look, Amanda Jones is coming. She helped start the group in Columbus. So that is pretty awesome. Recovering from Religion is a group that was started by Dr. Daryl Ray. And if you don't know Dr. Ray, you need to absolutely look him up and look up the organization, recoveringfromreligion.org. And Recovering from Religion is pretty simple. It is a group that meets to build community and just to help one another in the recovery process of leaving religion and its trauma and its impact and other things behind. Now, we are not therapists. We are not licensed clinical anything. I think that's what makes Recovering from Religion so unique, is that the power of story is so, it's so underestimated, just the power of our story. We don't need a 12-step program. We don't need anything like that. We just simply talk about the story of how religion has impacted our lives and what the journey out of religion has looked like for us. And it has just been an absolute phenomenal thing that's happened here in Columbus and around the country. When I first joined up and volunteered to lead a group with Amanda, who can hear me now probably. So hi, Amanda.
Hello.
Yes, we're recording this. They get a bunch of views on this later. So we expect millions and millions to watch this. But Recovering from Religion, when we started it here in Columbus, I think there were officially 9 groups around the world. So it wasn't because there wasn't a need for it. It's that Recovering from Religion is 100% a volunteer organization. And if there's not a leader that's kind of pushing that down, then it, you know, it just kind of stalled out a little bit. Hey, somebody needs to mute real quick. I don't know who it is. Maybe it's you, Joe.
Yeah, it might be me. I'll try it here.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm going to cancel you, man. So there were only about 9 groups meeting, but I think there were only a couple of active groups. And I had no idea because Dr. Darrell Ray is really well known. And, I'll get into my story in a second. I probably should have jotted down the skeleton framework for how I was going to do this. But anyway, there were 9 groups officially meeting. Really, there were only a few meeting. And I think today, as of today, I think there's 50 some groups meeting around the world. It's a very, very active and growing part of Recovering from Religion. So go to recoveringfromreligion.org, check it out. Number one, they have a chat line. So if you're struggling with religion and its impact and just some of the trauma and impact it's had on your life, there are 24/7 volunteers. Now, it's not staffed every hour, so I'll give a little plug for them that they could use more people. But it's typically staffed from somebody around the world because we have different time zones, obviously. And when people are really struggling with the issues that come with deconversion, or actually many people that chat in or that come to our group even have not made the decision fully to leave religion behind. They don't know. They don't know what they believe. So they have a chat line. It's more like a crisis chat line. They've got an active community on there via Slack. I think most of you probably have heard of Slack. So it's a nice way to communicate with one another. We have Recovering from Religion local groups, which is what we're mainly talking about tonight, like the one in Columbus and the one that's going to be started in Toledo. Yay. And then the fourth component is called the Secular Therapy Project, because many people find that they benefit from some sort of therapy, some sort of, counseling, whatever you want to call it. And I know that when I went out to get therapy and I started counseling when I was going through my crisis, the first couple of people had no idea what I was talking about, like an evangelical subculture, or if you were Catholic or you were a Methodist or whatever. They had no idea how to deal. It was foreign to them, or they were still in the faith and it was very awkward. And I've heard stories from other people that it's awkward when they talk about wanting to deconvert, or they have deconverted and they're sitting there almost trying to be talked back into it, which is ethically wrong, by a counselor. So the Secular Therapy Project is a part of RFR, Recovering from Religion. You can go and you can type in your area, and counselors that have said they have a humanistic worldview, if you want to call it that, or a worldview that would not involve bringing religion into the psychotherapy or just the counseling that you're going through, and you can connect with them. Okay, so that's Recovering from Religion. A little bit about our group. So it was 2014 that we started Recovering from Religion here in Columbus. And it was birthed out of just a drastic need. So a little bit about my story. I was a pastor. I was a church planter. We started churches. That means we started churches. Some people end up staying in those churches and pastoring them for decades, or staying there forever till they retire. Other people start different churches around the country. And we started a church in Northeast Ohio in a small community, and it literally blew up. It was a very large church in a town of 3,000. I think our last Easter there, our combined attendance was over 2,000 people. So it was a large work. It was an evangelical church. It was one of those that, you wear blue jeans, you drink coffee, we taught the Bible, tried to have an impact on our community. And we also started satellite campuses. So we had campuses like in Worcester, Ohio, Ashland, Ohio. We had one in China, as in like overseas. And that was started in 2002. In 2009, or it was just about 2010. I'm going to have to use some religious language here, so work with me. We felt the call from God to go do it again. So we were going to go plant a church again. We started one in Salt Lake City, a suburb of Salt Lake City. This will blow your mind. 60,000 people in this suburb, and not one church outside of Mormon. They were all LDS or Mormon churches, which is just unheard of anywhere else in the country. So, you know, we picked, well, we truly did pick. We felt the Lord was asking us at the time. We no longer believe that. We believe that that was just firmly our decision to start a church there, and it did really well. We then decided to move back to Columbus, Ohio, and start yet another church. I will really try to land the plane on my story, because if you really want to hear my whole story, maybe Doug will link to it. We did a podcast where I shared really in depth my story, and that would probably be a better way to do it, because it's kind of complicated, and I think that session's probably 35, 40 minutes long, maybe longer. I think the biggest thing that happened was, and you hear this time and time again from people that come through recovering from religion from our group, when you take the next step, like in leadership or in faith or whatever it is in the church world, many people feel that burden then that they have to do more than just know surface level theology, right? And I can tell you that between Amanda, Joe, myself, we have probably heard this a dozen times, maybe 2, 3, maybe 100 times. Their story will go, hey, I was going to be a small group leader. I was going to be a deacon at my church or whatever. And so I felt like I really needed to like know the Bible better. And so I decided that I should probably actually read the Bible, you know, that thing that we put all of our heart and soul into and we trusted in 100%. Most people have never read the entire thing at all. So the story would go like this. I started reading through the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, you know, and by the time I got to like Numbers and Deuteronomy, I was done. I thought, I can't believe this stuff anymore. And that's kind of what happened to me. It wasn't that I studied the Bible. I mean, I have a master's of religion. I studied it in depth. But what happened to me was I had time now, because I wasn't planting a church. I wasn't preaching 5 and 6 times a weekend, to just sit back and reflect on where I was. And a long story short, I can assure you of that, I came to the conclusion that all of those things that I had swept under the rug and found pat answers to and put them in the back of my mind, I now had time to address. I didn't want to address them, but the closet doors were flung open and there they were. And being a rational person, a person that wants to, I love to study, I love to read, I love to look at things. And what I used to do is just kind of skip over it when I found a pat answer from some Christian apologist and not really address it. It was very easy for me to understand that I no longer could subscribe to this sort of faith system. Okay. Through that process, I guess I didn't realize what kind of, I mean, I knew that there could be some trauma to it. I mean, I think I had met one atheist in my life. I'm not kidding you. One overt atheist, you know, and we had thousands of people come through the church, and I knew thousands of people in the community. I was scared to death. I didn't know anything. I had never read Hitchens or Dawkins or any of these people. I just knew that I didn't believe this anymore. Well, of course, when you're a pastor and your entire family, you know, everybody's Christian, your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, the entire community, you decide not to believe that anymore. It's kind of a bad thing. It's kind of like converting from Republican to Democrat or something, like just out of the blue, or vice versa, right? As a matter of fact, we discussed this at our group last time, that if you converted from like Republican to Democrat, we took a little survey, informal, at our group, like people said, easily you would be accepted so much more than if you were to come out and say, I no longer believe in God. I think the Pew Religious Forum did a survey, and it said that like atheists were like 2 notches below like Islamic terrorists. So, you know, they're not always the most loved people, right? And so not only did we lose our, I mean, obviously I lost my career, I lost finances. I found myself in the middle of a mental, I would call it a breakdown. I mean, I was at the verge of absolutely a nervous breakdown. And that is when I found the SHoWLE Therapy Project after 2 failed counselors who looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what do you mean? Why don't you just tell everybody you're atheist and just be done with it? And I'm like, okay, you just don't get it. On top of that, the other thing that's greatly missing for the secular community, humanist community, atheist community, whatever it might be, is that word community. I didn't know any other people that had done what I had done. I didn't hardly know anybody else that would claim to be, like I said, atheist. So I connected up with our local humanist group. It's called Humanist Community of Central Ohio. And Doug was very vital in that work down here in Columbus as well. And I thank him greatly for that. It took me about a year just to work up the courage to go to like one of the meetings. I then heard through HCCO that there was this recovering from religion group, and come to find out it was actually being run at the time by a guy that was also a former pastor who had deconverted. And he was at the end of his tour. He had been doing it for a long time. And the very first meeting I showed up at, he thought that I would be a great person to take over the group. And I said, I'm like on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He's like, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. So I remember talking to the people at Recovering from Religion and saying, hey, I want to start this group, but I'm a hot mess, so I doubt you want me to. And they're like, well, you know, and they vetted me a little bit, but they were like, no, I think you could. So that long story to say this, okay, there was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of pain. There still is. I can tell you, we deconverted in 2012. I don't feel like we've caught up yet. I mean, we're getting there because other things in life creep in, but I don't feel like we've caught up. And there's still a tremendous amount of hurt and pain and things that we continually have to work through. But we put out an announcement on Meetup, and I said, well, that's fine. And I told my wife, I said, hey, babe, we're going to do this thing because this is one way to build community. And we put out an announcement through HCCO that we were going to have this group. It was going to be at my house. You had to drive to a stranger's house. We had no idea what was going to happen. And that was 2014. I think that was October 2014. And I wish we had better records, but we say somewhere around, I guarantee we've had over 1,000 people. Now, how many of those people were unique over the years? I don't know. Maybe 500, 600. I'm not sure. But we've had that many people come through our house or now joining us virtually because of COVID online. And there is such a tremendous need. The stories that we hear week in and week out are just captivating. They just, I mean, I don't even have time to share some of those stories. Maybe we can talk about a few of them later during the Q&A time. But I can't describe to you the tremendous need that is out there just to have a space for people to come and share their story. Some people have tremendous amounts of loss and chaos in their lives from leaving religion. Other people, it's not as tremendous, but it's still there. We have had people come to our group that still are believers. We don't try to deconvert them. They're trying to figure it out. They're scared of atheists. They're scared of the word humanist. They've been told so many lies from the church, from people like myself. And I do admit and ask for forgiveness for the years that I led people astray. It still bothers me. But we all have to, admit our mistakes and try to, find the path of truth in this life, this one and only life we have. But there are so many people that have come that have had, that they're still Christians, or we will see a husband come for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, and all of a sudden they bring their wife who is still a believer. And it's just been fascinating to watch these people slowly see that we aren't a bunch of heathens that are sacrificing babies in the backyard, you know, on Halloween night and drinking goat's blood. And there's other analogies I use, but I'll keep it clean here tonight, okay? And I think for most of the people, I can't say every single person, but most people have come to the point where they also have left religion behind, not because we convince them. We just sit around and tell our story, and we talk about how we came to that conclusion. And there's no pressure, there's none of that, but it's fascinating to see this. And it's fascinating to see how these marriages can stay together at that point, because you can imagine a firmly entrenched believing spouse and then one that's not. We just had last week at our group. We've been doing this for a long time now. Myself, Amanda, Joe, my wife. We just had somebody, and our group starts at 7 and ends at 9:30. Supposed to end at 9, never does. I definitely try to cut it off at 9:30. And I made the comment because I kind of felt like there was a young lady there, and you could just tell that she was hurting. And so I just kind of threw out a comment. I'm like, yeah, sometimes, you know, we stay till midnight or whatever. And she did pipe up and she goes, you know, I think I could be one of those people tonight that stays till midnight. And we were like, okay. So I actually turned the group over to Amanda, and I went down and got some dinner because I hadn't eaten all night, and brought it up, and we dialogued some more. And every single week, I would say 97, 96, 95% of the time, it's no lower than that. We have new people that come that just need to see community, and that they are okay to think the way that they're thinking, that it's gonna be okay, and that this is a safe place where you can be gay, straight, you know, bi, the whole rainbow of sexualities. You can be Democrat, you can be Republican, you can be independent, you can be Green Party. You could have been any sort of religious background. You can still be a Christian. And we just sit and share our stories. And there's something powerful in that when I hear somebody like Joe, or I hear somebody like Amanda share their story. Just last week, I think I told Amanda, or the week before, I said, hey, I've never heard that part. And she said something, and I won't recall it in the moment, that really struck me. Oh, I do remember what it was. She said, you know, because one of the things when you lose religion, you lose your worldview. Your whole worldview is built off of this text in the church. And she said, you know what? It's going to be interesting to see what it's like to raise my kids in a humanist, a secular household, to see how they build a worldview. And that just struck me. Of course, I had thought about that before, but I'd never really thought about that. And it hit me in a whole new way. And I said, boy, that is interesting, because those of us that carry this baggage from the church over, so many things that we still think, whether we think we're thinking it or not, is viewed through the lens of a religious landscape, right? And so it's fascinating. We continue to learn from one another. And the other thing about Amanda, this is one of my favorite things ever, because she's been coming since almost the beginning. She's our co-leader, and I just love her to death. She said, it was at Christmas time, and I said, it was right around the 5 or 6 year mark that I had come out, and I said, man, it just feels like, you know, you feel like you get somewhere, you feel like you're finally getting somewhere, and then you just get kicked in the teeth again, and you're going right through all this stuff. And she said, you know what? She said, that's because I don't think we'll ever be recovered from religion. We're probably always going to be recovering from religion. And that might sound dark. It might sound like fatalistic, but it's probably the truth. Religion is such a pervasive force in our society for many of us, a job, school, family, whatever it might be, that if we aren't prepared, we're going to continue to get kicked in the teeth when we least expect it. And so I think most of us have gotten to a pretty healthy spot that have been coming for a long time. But we still have to be careful, and we still need one another to have this community and be able to dialogue with each other. So I'm going to stop there on recovering from religion, because I could talk for hours and it will be like a squirrel running through a field of acorns. It is just the most powerful thing that I've witnessed on this side of non-faith. The other thing that I'm supposed to chat about tonight, because I am a former pastor and so is Joe, is the Clergy Project. And so I will simply leave the Clergy Project as this. The Clergy Project is recovering from religion, but it is only for those that were professional clergy or professional ministry. It was your job. And it is basically the same thing. So go to recoveringfromreligion.org. I'm sorry, go to theclergyproject.org. And it is just for those people that were professional clergy paid ministry staff, because not that we're special or anything, but there are unique challenges for those of us that were pastors before in coming out. But I really see the two organizations. We work very closely together. Lon Ostrander is our president. I'm on the board of the Clergy Project as well. We work hand in hand so well. So the Clergy Project is one entity, recovering from religion is the other, and we really work hand in hand in helping people come out of religion and the trauma that can come with that. I think I've spent enough time kind of giving the background on all of that. There's lots of stories and lots of things to share. But the need is great. And I'll tell you this, let me just say this before I kick it down to Joe to get some comment from him, and maybe even Amanda as well. Obviously, I'd love to hear her. I shot her a text. I'm like, you should get on this thing tonight. What I see with recovering from religion is I see a lot of people that have tried to start some groups, and they find that they're spinning their wheels sometimes. But I'll tell you what, some people don't, and I don't share these stories enough with even our group. I know that there was somebody on last week, and he actually shared that for a year he wanted to come. We have people that RSVP 20 times and they don't show up that night for various reasons. I know that it took me a year to walk into HCCO. I filled out an application for the Clergy Project probably 3 times and threw it in the trash because I was scared. So it's amazing what happens when you start to see some traction form around this. It does not take a lot of effort, I can tell you that. There's not a curriculum, there's not any of that. If you can have a space and facilitate a conversation and help people understand that it's a safe place. I mean, trust me, most people that come to our group are like Democrat, right? I mean, they just are now. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but they've made that their choice. And obviously politics have come up a lot in the last couple of years. And I'm very careful at the beginning of our group to point out that we could have people there that are Republican or that are whatever else, and that we're not trying to demean that. So, you know, it's such a tricky thing for so many people, and there's such a fear for so many people to come out. And so once this gets some traction and it starts to build, it is, I am just amazed week after week after week. I think last week, I don't know, I think we had, I don't even remember, they all run together. I think we had like 10 people, something like that, 10, 11 people. And I think we probably had 3 new people. Now, one of them was a group leader, something like that. But I would love to see something like this going in Toledo. And I think that you guys have traction to pull from, you know, Michigan and some other places like that. So that's all I'm going to say as far as those 2 organizations and the needs. So let me kick it down to Joe and get his feedback. You're on mute, Joe. Or did you fall asleep?
Hey, there we go.
I would have fallen asleep.
I hope I didn't fall asleep. I'm driving. So, yeah. So my name is Joe, and I've gotten to know Charles over the last couple of years. And so we both work with the Clergy Project, and I've gone to his group in Columbus, Recovering from Religion. And so just kind of a quick glimpse of my story. They'll kind of give some background. Is like Charles, I was pastor for 12, 13 years. I loved what I did. I think that's one of the things of pastors. They love what they do for the most part. And so it's such a hard transition. I tell people, imagine this way. You are working for the creator of the universe on his special mission to save people's souls. I mean, you are working for a superhero. You are Robin. You're the sidekick. And you go from that to, I just need to, make money to pay the bills to feed my family. And there's nothing wrong with the latter, but I think you can understand the difficulty in it and the cognitive struggle. And so basically my story goes like this. I was a younger pastor, and I was very passionate about what I did. I had just been offered my dream job as a pastor, and I felt like, quote unquote, God was saying, no, don't take it. And to me, it was kind of a thing of, like, God, like, I've worked really hard for this. And I started thinking, well, what if that God isn't real? Will I just be, wasting my whole life doing what I think, a magical being in the sky is telling me to, with no real evidence? And around that same time, I had gone to Denmark, and I had spoken 10 messages on living a life all out for Christ. Living a life all out by living for Christ. And I started thinking, once again, what if this isn't true? What if I'm just living a lie and I don't have legit answers? I'm just spewing stuff because it sounds good and people listen to it. And I went on a long journey, about 2.5 years. I estimated that over 2.5 years, I studied about 5,400 hours, I once estimated. And I think where I'm going this. I came to a conclusion that I don't think it matters what you believe. To think that I could be less of a person because I can't believe in a alleged historical event from 2,000 years ago, it just doesn't matter. Who cares? And if there was a God who would hold that against me, that's not a good, loving God. And to me, I thought what really matters is if you are a loving person. That's it. That's what it comes down to. No other doctrine, no other requirement. And so that's how I try to live my life now. And that kind of leads us to today and recovering from religion. First, I'll get into the Clergy Project, but then I'll transition to recovering from religion. And so out of that love, I started working with the Clergy Project. I started serving on their board about a year ago with Charles. And this last year, I've loved it to get to be in a position to strive to help people who are going through such a difficult time. And one of the specific areas that the Clergy Project has asked me to help out in is clergy. One of their biggest things is career-wise. What do they do? What else do they know? How do they convince, another workplace, hey, I got the skills. How do they make that transition? How do they tell their family that I need to look for a different job? And so I've started working with clergy who are still currently clergy, as well as those who are now out but are still transitioning. And I mentioned how difficult it is to make that transition. University of Chicago had a study years ago that showed that clergy they are the most satisfied in their jobs. And so, once again, you can imagine how difficult it is. And so that's my specific role at the Clergy Project. So I throw that out there. If you're listening, you would like to know more about that, get involved. If you're someone who can help with that, who is looking for awesome employees, we have some great ones. Transitioning into recovering from religion. I'm from Toledo. I've gone numerous times to the group there in Columbus, and I've loved it. Charles reached out to me a year and a half ago or so and invited me. And I've made the drive several times because it's been that worth it to me to have that community, to have others. And I'll kind of end with this. We want to get a group going in Toledo. you can't tell me that in a metro area of, I think, 1.5 million people, that there's not a need for it. There's definitely a need for it. And beyond that, if I remember my Latin well, the word for courage, which in philosophical viewpoints and even in modern day positive psychology, courage is at the core of what it means to love. And courage, the core, it actually means, the C-O-R means heart in Latin. And the heart is what makes the whole body thrive. It sends the blood to everything else. And so we have to have courage to live. And I say that with recovering from religion is I need to have the courage myself to stand up and to be able to be a voice to others and say, once again, it's okay. You can't believe in an event from 2,000 years ago or whatever your religious doctrines are. Who cares? Are you a person who strives to love? Well, then you're good in my book. That's it. And I think that's the value of recovering from religion. There's others who are going through it, who can share their struggle, who can just simply be a voice that says, it's all right. I've gone through the same thing. And so if you're listening, I encourage you, let's get a group going. I would love to be able to do this myself. I have a very busy schedule and I want to get a group going in Toledo, but I know I need help. So I'll end my stuff with that. Hello. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you. Thank you, Joe, for your comments. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry, I had to grab a snack. This is our life, you know. I mean, it's busy.
I was worried that I did one of those things where you go on the long rant talking on the phone. You realize that you lost service, 10 minutes ago. So
yeah, or you get done talking and you hear beep beep beep.
Yep.
So yeah, I had a question either for Charles or for Joe, either one. You guys are pretty out front. You're public. You've agreed to be recorded. But not everybody can do that. If somebody is thinking about coming to Recovering from Religion or the Clergy Project, how concerned should they be about that getting out into the public?
No, that's a great question. I think that we all were concerned about that. And to be honest with you, like my first public big thing anyway, like that was out there was actually a podcast that you did. So it was by choice that I chose not to be like a public, thing just because of the mental trauma and just the things we were going through and my kids' ages, how old they were. And we've since made the decision that, that we're okay, being more public with this. But as far as the Clergy Project, that's its own entity. It's extremely private. So nobody, if you're a former ministry worker, you have nothing to be concerned of outside of, I mean, I guess somebody could hack a site. I mean, that's always there. But it's you don't even have to use your own name. You don't have to use your own, no identifying features at all. I mean, the only people that would know who you truly are are the people that screen you. Recovering from religion, outside of the Russian hackers that jump on there and infiltrate Zoom now and again, I guess. That was a joke. I probably shouldn't throw out a nationality there. But, they've had some issues with security. I think it's a lot more secure. Like my company, I work for a $40 billion company and we use Zoom now. They finally determined that it was safe. You can come and you can change your name and you can go just like what we do when we were eating there. And you can stop your video and you don't have to have your picture there and you can change your name down at the bottom. And it's 100% anonymous. Now, when you come to the group, there is a little vulnerability. And I always say at the beginning, this is confidential. Please don't share. So we're very careful to talk about that.
Does anybody else have any questions?
No, but you know what? I would love to have Amanda, if she would be willing, just to share a few minutes because you know, it just so happened that Joe and I are both former pastors. So she is not. You know what it's like to be a non-clergy coming to recovering from religion, because 99% of the people that come to recovering from religion are not professional clergy in the past. So Amanda, if you'd like to share your story, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. So I'm Amanda. I started going to Charles's group probably a few weeks or maybe a couple months after he had started having it. My deconversion was the opposite of Charles. It took a really long time for me to sort of come to that conclusion. I grew up in a fundamentalist evangelical Christian home. So my parents are young earth creationist, pretty extreme in terms of their religious beliefs. And I absolutely accepted it fully and believed all of that was true. I went to Israel on a tour when I was in high school. It was very much an ingrained part of my identity and how I understood myself and my place in the world and why I was here. I went to public college, and that was kind of my first exposure really to people who thought very differently than I did. And that's when things started to kind of crumble gradually. Eventually, I actually saw an advertisement for Audible, and the advertisement was, if you'll try an Audible subscription, we'll give you a free book. And the free book was The God Virus by Daryl Ray. So I was like, well, that sounds interesting. So I listened to it and I was like, oh my word, like this makes so much sense. And so that led me to the God delusion. And when I got to the part where Dawkins breaks down, you know, how an atheist is defined, like I don't have to say there's definitely not a God to be an atheist. I was like, that's it. That's me. I fall in this bucket. During this whole process of deconverting, I was fairly certain I was no longer a Christian, but had not yet had not reached the conclusion that I was an atheist when my husband and I were getting married. So he's sort of marginally Catholic, like, you know, they're Catholic, but this is not like an important part of their life, kind of Catholic. So he just kind of basically pretended to be really into Christianity while we were dating, so that my family would go along with things. And then shortly after we were married was when I was kind of like, okay, I'm really done. And he was fine with it. We've never had any issues between the two of us. And at first I did not disclose that to my family or anyone. I was still afraid, like, what if tomorrow I snap out of it and I realize, oh, this is the piece I was missing. And I didn't want that sort of like humiliation within my relationships of like having, you know, being the doubting Thomas of my inner circle. So I held it onto it. But I did start reaching out to some cousins and an aunt of mine that consider themselves sort of Christian or spiritual, but they're very liberal in their political views and very accepting. And we started, you know, just really talking and engaging a lot more. At some point I shared an article with one of my cousins privately, and she was like, this is amazing. Would it be all right if I share this on Facebook? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. You know, I didn't tie my name to it or anything. But I did go ahead and like the post on Facebook, which my mother saw. And so a few weeks later, she confronted me about it. And asked if I was still a Christian. And at that point I was kind of like, I'm not going to play this game anymore. So I just said, no, I'm not. And she asked if I still believe in Jesus. And I said, no, I don't. And then she goes, well, then how do you explain Noah's Ark? And I just was like, well, I mean, how do you explain it? So thankfully we were at my aunt's house at the time. So there wasn't really a good opportunity for dialogue. So it kind of got dropped fairly quickly. But my mom made sure to send me a follow-up email telling me that I was going to hell and that I needed to change my ways. So it was a really tumultuous experience with my family and coming out, although my coming out was by choice. I mean, I certainly knew what I was doing at the time. And if you're not out to your family and you feel in any way that you're that you would be in any type of danger of harm, then absolutely stay in the closet until you can be safe. I don't just want to put that out there. There's no like badge of honor you get for telling people something that could cause them to harm you. So put your well-being first. That being said, I don't, in my case, I was not, I had moved out of my parents' home. I was fully, financially and physically independent. So I didn't have those fears anymore. I think I would have been more afraid had I still lived with them. The beginning of coming out, I think, is the worst part, especially if you have family or friends that are not accepting of that. The loss was profound for me and for a lot of people that have come to recovering from religion. There was a period of about 6 months where I was no contact with my mom because she was just not willing to be respectful of boundaries. And she basically just left me with no choice but to say, this stops. Like, I'm not going to be around you unless if you can start to be respectful. We do have contact now. And I do still have to, kind of enforce those boundaries periodically, but it's significantly improved. And I've been out as an atheist for, how long has it been, Charles? 6 years?
Yeah, I think it was if it was fall of 2014, I think we started the group. Yeah,
and I think I had come out by then. So I probably came out as an atheist maybe late 2014. So yeah, I mean, that's the bulk of it. It's gotten better as time has passed, and as people have kind of gotten used to the idea that I'm an atheist.
Yes.
There's a substantial loss of intimacy with my family that are still Christians. So, we're generally polite to each other, but I'm also typically not invited to things unless it's really like they're inviting absolutely everyone. So, I mean, there's a loss there, and that's part of why I've continued to come to this group, for all these years, is that this is where I have found friendships and people that really understand what I've experienced. And that can be hard to find, when you meet other people whose families are marginally religious, it's not the same impact to them, and it can be really hard for them to understand that. I mean, even to this day, my husband still can't wrap his brain around the things that he's witnessed me going through, because he just can't understand why you would do that. You do the things that my parents have done and said to someone that you love, or envisioning doing that to our children, yeah. So
yeah, and I think that one of the things that we've seen is that, like Joe can speak to this. we were pastors, and when you see somebody come and they get involved in the church, you expect them to continue to be involved and to continue to stick around and continue to do these things. One of the things with recovering from religion is we'll see people come that are, hurt pretty deeply, and they might come one time. And literally it helps them figure a lot of stuff out. They might come for 6 months. They might pop in now and again. But we see a lot of people come, and you can just sense it with them that over time they have begun to recover. And they have then found other groups, because we keep recovering from religion very focused on the recovery, process. And again, not a 12-step process or anything. But then there are people like Amanda, who I can't thank enough, because she's been a great just leader and support. She's our co-leader. And, we do it many times. Now, trust me, there are times, even though we only do it twice a month, because we are all so stinking busy, that it's like, oh my goodness, I got to do this. And I'm 5 minutes in it, and I'm like, man, this is the greatest thing ever, because we are leaders and this is what we've chosen to commit our passion to. But there's not a week that goes by typically where I'm not learning something or just feeling that sense. So it has become a community for us. So I'm glad that you said that. One of the things that I just wanted to ask too, outside of community, I mean, is there maybe a generic story or two, just briefly, that have, that you've looked at and that has just made you go, wow? or is it like every other week like me?
We've had some really interesting ones. We had someone come who was a monk for the vast majority of his life. So his story was just fascinating. And we've had people that come from a variety of religious backgrounds. So it's not just people who are ex-Christians. So that can be a really culturally informative experience to hear, what that, both what it's like to be in a faith other than the one that I was in. I only have insight into my own experience. So it's good to hear what it was like to be a part of other faith traditions, and also what it was like to be a part of leading those other faith traditions. So
yeah, like it is Islam, we've had Hindu, we've had cults. Well, they're all cults, but you know what I mean? Like how we used to term them cults, Amanda and Joe, right?
Yeah.
I wrote down, I was jotting down a few of those, and yeah, the gentleman that came for a long time, he's since moved out of state, and we still have contact via email, but he was in a silent monastery, and it was his story, which I still to this day just get shivers. The only way he knew that somebody had landed on the moon was that next to the monastery, there was an apartment complex or something like that, and they had their window open, and he heard it on the TV. So he was like a silent, in a silent monastery. And when you come to the group, like Amanda and I know how to keep our story short. I know that might seem weird for me because I just blab all the time, but we could typically kind of rip through our story in about 5 minutes or so. And then we give the floor for as long as you want to talk when you're new. You could take an hour or so. And I honestly think he holds the record. I believe, maybe I'm not remembering this right, but it was well over an hour that he talked.
Yeah, I think he actually may have been the only person that shared that time, and everyone in the room was completely fine with that. Like his story was just amazing.
Afterwards, he came up to me and he apologized like 5 times. He said, "Charles, I'm so sorry." I said, no, you are supposed to do that. He goes, "Well, you don't understand. Like the longest that I've ever spoke to anybody at one time, even to this day, is like 3 minutes." So here's this guy who had been out of it for such a long time that he had this stuff. I tell you another thing that I wrote down is, outside of just the mental trauma, we get a lot of people, especially in the Midwest, that are concerned about their jobs. And I don't want to get off on that topic, but it is something that should absolutely be addressed sometime. I mean, I currently, for my job, I've transitioned. I've been one of the lucky ones, Clergy Project. I have a really good job. Now, it took a long time to get into this, but I teach surgeons how to use tools. I sell them tools during surgery. And then I make sure that, now I'm not teaching them how to do surgery or any of that sort of stuff, but they need to know the parameters of how our devices work. So we are there to make sure that if they have a question, that we can answer that. And during the election in 2016, everybody around the table was talking about the election. And you actually want your surgeons relaxed. You want them talking, because when it's really quiet and you can hear a pin drop, trust me, that's not good in a surgery. And they eventually got around the table, and the surgeon's like, "Well, Charles, you haven't said anything. What do you think about this?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I was prepared for that moment." And I gave the most generic answer, because we don't want to get in that. But, here we are in a surgery, and it's a job, and all of the rest of the people around the table were obviously very different from my ideology, and they wanted to know my ideology. And here's a guy that's, I'm selling products to, that's helping me make a living as well, that you don't necessarily want to piss off, but you also don't want to lie. So it's this whole, people have this at work all the time. They talk about, pray for so-and-so or do this or do that. And they just really sense that they are an outsider at work and can't even share it there.
Well, Charles, I work for an organization, and there are definitely difficult days when, they're praying for you. They want to come bless your hands. They want to, and part of my job is reading church newsletters. I read 30 to 40 church newsletters a month. And oh my God, are there crazy people out there?
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have to. worry whether or not you have a certain faith tradition as to whether you keep your job. Now, in most cases, if I understand the law correctly, it's illegal. Now, if you're in a Christian school, there are some protections and things like that, maybe. But for the rest of us, there's absolute protections in that. But yet there's ways around that, as we all know. The other thing is, politically, a lot of this stuff has come up. There's a couple things that we were always taught not to talk about growing up: religion and politics. And I can tell you that at my job, I'm probably one of the few that, and I don't go publicly saying these things, but I know most of the people have some sort of faith, probably. And they probably politically think different than me. And, we shouldn't have to hide or be concerned about that. But unfortunately, we do. And we do have a lot of people that come and talk about that. The last thing that I wanted to mention that I jotted down here is, I'll tell you what, there is a tremendous amount of people. And I think that Joe and Amanda can echo this, that have come through our group that have deconverted because of LGBTQ issues. And I was brave enough one time to ask the question of a person, and because I had heard it so many times from different people, and I thought, I'm just going to ask, because she's been coming for a long time. I said, so was it harder to come out as as a lesbian or as a non-believer? And she said, hands down, a lesbian. So here you have somebody that's dealing with, a sexuality that they were born with, that they should be proud of, that obviously that's a whole nother podcast, but a whole set of problems to deal with. And on top of that, they have since decided that since the Bible is pretty wicked against that they no longer believe in the Bible and they no longer have faith. And they're now dealing with two massive issues in their life. And we have plenty of people. We had a missionary who not only came to our group that deconverted, his wife was still a believer, and he worked through that. And then I don't know if it was a year into it or so, he came and he dropped the bomb on us that he said, well, I've separated from my wife. And I guess I thought it was going to be because, of the whole Christianity thing. And he said, I've been living a lie. I've been gay my whole life, and religion wouldn't allow me. So I've now been kicked out of the house because I admitted who I was. So, there's so many stories that are interwoven in this thing. And I tell you what, I bet you, Doug, the first 2 years of this, now I was still going through some mental things myself, but every time we would have a group, it would stir it up so much in me that I couldn't go to bed till 3 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, I thank Amanda, I thank Joe, I thank Bev, and I thank you, Doug, for what you did. You were a part of helping me in my life because you were a part of HCCO, and that was a very, very safe place to go. And HCCO has been big in allowing us to promote our group through them. That's all we've done for marketing. I mean, literally, that's it. So I hope you guys get something going.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I really want to thank you for your time tonight, Charles and Joe and Amanda, and I really appreciate it. We'll probably have some contact information up for people that might be interested in starting the Toledo group, so they can get in touch with Joe. I'll arrange that with Joe later, and we'll put it in with the video blurb and all that stuff and on the website. And again, I really do appreciate it, the stories and what Recovering from Religion does. I kind of feel bad sometimes that I didn't have to use that, but I know that some people do, and it does help them. And same with the Clergy Project and the Secular Therapy Project, because they're very important. Everybody has things that they are going through, and they need a helping hand to get through it. Just secular people do, and just like religious people do.
They don't know that there are. We hear it every week, Doug, that they do not know anybody else and they come and see that most of us are, I mean, I'm not, but most people that come are fairly normal people, right? I mean, and that is probably one of the biggest comments we get. The other thing that I didn't mention that I wrote down on here is that we have seen suicides through the Clergy Project, unfortunately, and we know that people take their own lives as well, because of the trauma of leaving religion. So this is a very, very deep thing that is just like the LGBTQ thing, that is one of those closeted things. And we thank you for what you did. One last one. Can I say this?
Yeah, go ahead.
We actually have a guy who, when he got married, he and his spouse were not believers, and they raised their kids in a non-religious household. And all of a sudden, one by one, people started converting. And he shows up, and the guy, I love the guy. He's just an amazing person. And he comes, big burly guy, big old beard, and he just cries. Like, there's a lot of tears shed usually, but he just cries. And he always says it. He said, when he tells the story, he goes, "I'm not here because I need to recover from religion. I am coming because of needing recovery from other people's religion and what he's going through." So they've all converted now, and like, he's disinvited to weddings, and they don't want him there because he doesn't want to pray and all of this. So it's just the whole gamut. We could tell a million stories, but that's a good one worth sharing.
All right, and don't have any confirmation on what we have planned for next month, but hopefully we'll have another speaker. And again, check out the information when we post the video, and in on our social media pages. And always check out humanistwle.org for all the latest information about the group. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. See ya.
Okay.